how to create water splash simulation in Blender. Today I'm going to show you guys how to create a water splash simulation like the one you saw at the beginning of this video. So without further ado, let's head into Blender that we already are in. Anyways, here is our scene and we're going to be recreating that water splash simulation. So a couple of things you need to know first is that let's first hide the whole environment, then let's continue. So yeah, a couple of things you need to know first is that we need a proxy mesh because this mesh is too dense to actually be a collider for our water simulation. It's going to bog down our system, so we need a proxy mesh, and that is where this proxy mesh I've created comes in. So a proxy mesh is just a low poly version of our mesh that we're going to use as a collider, a simplified low poly version of our mesh, as we can see. So if you tab into edit mode, you can see how simple the geometry is, so that the simulation will be able to run smoothly. So now that we have our proxy mesh, we want our water scene to come from the back and splash on the bottle. So let's create a cube object to do that. Yeah, and this should be quite all right for what we are going for. So now that we have this, there are a couple of ways to create a liquid simulation or a fluid simulation. But the way I best like to do it is just when I have the object selected for ease, so that Blender can kind of do the back end work for you. If not, you have to start doing everything manually from beginning. So when I have my objects I want to be used as liquid simulation selected, I go into object, quick effects, and then quick liquid. And then you see that Blender has kind of like set everything up. It has changed the way my view looks. Now you can see we're in wireframe view. You can see it has created a domain for me and all. But now this domain is too big, so we want to scale the domain and everything. And one other thing I forgot to say, while doing simulations or anything in Blender, always remember to apply your scale. So that is Control A and then apply, then you select scale. Always remember to apply your scale. If not, your simulations won't work well. So no matter what you do, anything you adjust, you always make sure you apply your scale after adjusting, because I'm also going to scale this domain down now to fit here because the domain is too big for this. And you can see something has happened now, and that is also one of the things that happens when you choose the object and then quick effects. What Blender has done now is that it has made the domain into a mesh. It has started doing the calculations already, but we don't want that. We're still in the beginning phases. So while selected on the liquid domain object, we're going to scroll down and untick mesh. So now mesh is not going to be rendered. It's just going to render the domain flat, and then we're going to see the particles, which are this thing. So let's continue our scaling down that we were doing before that happened. And now that we have that, Control A and scale. Now this scene is modeled to scale, and what I mean by that is that this bottle is as small as an actual soda bottle is in real life. So that means that's why you can see that these particles here are kind of big. If we press play, you can see that the particles just fall down. Now we want to change it, selecting on the object we created for the liquid scene. We want to change it from geometry here into inflow. And now if we press, we can see that it's a continuous flow. But now these particles are too big. There are simpler ways to kind of make the whole fluid simulation work in the actual scale that it is, but I don't have that time and I don't have that mental capacity. So I'm going to show you guys a kind of trick way I do it. I'm going to scale everything up, and then when I'm done with the simulation, I'm going to scale it back. So how do I do that? Shift A, and then I add an empty, and then I'm just going to select everything in this scene and parent it to this empty that I have. So I select everything, Control P, object, keep transform, and now I'm just going to scale everything up. And then you can see as I'm scaling everything up, you can see how small the particles inside the fluid mesh is becoming. You can see how small those particles are becoming as I'm scaling everything up. So I'm just going to scale them to a good place that I think, okay, this looks nice. Okay, let's scale it up a little bit. This looks nice. And scaling up this way doesn't affect the scale of the individual object. So after I scale up this empty, I don't need to go and apply the scale of this empty, because when I'm done now, all I need to do, when I'm done with my whole fluid simulation, all I need to do is press Alt S, and it will revert back to its actual original scale. So you can see that. So that's why this method is very useful. So now that we have scaled it up, we have let's play our fluid simulation and see what's going on. Yeah, everything is just falling down. I think I'm still going to scale it up a little bit. I need more. Yeah, so let's play now. You can see everything is just falling down. Everything is just falling down. And that's not what we want. We want the fluid to shoot out from here and hit the bottle. So let's add that shoot out. So we're going to select the fluid object again, and we're going to use initial velocity. So let's increase the, I think is y, the minus y. So let's change the minus y to, let's change the y value to -2. Yeah, and then let's play that. And yeah, it's shooting the way we want, but it is too much. So let's change it to -1, and let's play. It's still shooting, it's still shooting. Now you can see that as it's shooting, let's look at the simulation. As it's shooting, it is going down, and that's because there is gravity in this simulation. So to turn off the gravity, we're going to select the domain now, and we're going to scroll down to field weights, and we're going to drag the gravity down to 0. So let's go back, and now let's play. And you can see it just shoots out straight because there is no gravity again in this simulation. So now it is not colliding with this our proxy mesh. So we want to make this proxy mesh a collider, and to do that we select the proxy mesh, go into physics, yeah, and then we select fluid and change this to effector, and you can see it's a collision. And then if we play, we have collision. As you can see, we have collision, and everything is already done. Everything is done. Okay, let's also make this ground object a collision object. So fluid, effector, and is a collider. So let's play. Yeah, like this, everything is already looking Gucci. Everything is looking done. All we need to do now is just to tweak the simulation to have that splash. That's all we need. So let's just do some tweaking. We're going to add some sub steps because the simulation is moving a bit fast. So we're going to add sub steps to the collider objects because the simulation is moving fast. And then in the main domain itself, we're just going to adjust some parameters here. That's just it. Let's increase the flip ratio. Sorry, that's just to make the fluid more flippy, more bouncy, more scattery, if I may say. And yeah, basically let's test how it looks now. Yeah, we can see something is looking good, something is looking nice, something is looking nice, something is looking nice. So yeah, we have something that is looking good. But now we are running now. So we're running the simulation as a resolution of 32. That's resolution division of 32. Another thing I have to say, this is not a beginner tutorial, so you already have to kind of understand how fluid simulations work. If not, you're going to be very confused here. So we're going to increase this to 62. And you can see more fluid has coming. And there's another trick I found that is that while increasing this resolution division, you have to be careful because when you are trying to create splash simulations, increasing the resolution division adds more particles and therefore like makes it, should I say, harder to splash. So the more you increase this resolution division, the more particles is added into the simulation and the harder it is. Because let's say you dropped a bottle into an ocean that has like a high density fluid, it's not going to splash. But if you dropped it into a shallow water, it's just going to splash immediately. Yeah, so I believe that makes sense what I just explained. So that's why you also have to be careful while increasing this resolution division while trying to create splash simulations. So let's play and see what we have. Woo! This is even, oh my god, this is even sweeter than the one I had, bro. This is sweeter than the one I had in the actual final simulation, but it's calm. Let's go. This looks good already. We're going to, so we already have this lockdown, and if your system can't preview it like mine is, you may need to come here and change it from replay to modular, and then you can see everything has gone. This modular is what we're going to use for the final sim, but I'm just telling you that if your system can't preview, like when you increase the resolution division, if it's like lagging or your system crashes, what you need to do is to come here, change it to, well, let that come here in the cache, change it from replay means you see it happening in real time, and I change it to modular means you bake it step by step. And to also be able to bake the mesh after you have baked the particles, we are going to tick on is resumable. So let's go now, and we're going to bake the particles, which is what we already previewing already. So that is big data. We're going to bake the data, but before we do that, let's actually reduce the length of the simulation to just let me say 20 frames is okay. Yeah, I believe everything would have been done, or even 10 frames. I believe everything would have been done in 10 frames. So we're going to bake the data, and let's do that right now. Yes, and you can see we already have that splash. It's already looking sweet. It's already looking liquidious. Anyways, now that we've baked the data, everything is calm, everything is good. We're now going to scroll down, and we're going to scroll down to mesh. We're going to activate mesh. Now we can bake the mesh off the bat, but I want to advise you guys to always play with your mesh settings. We can bake the mesh off the bat, but I noticed that the default way Blender bakes mesh, you kind of make it low resolution. So I'm just going to play with it a little bit. So we're going to increase the uprest factor, let's say to 4. Now we're going to reduce the particle radius so that it is more closer to the actual particles. That's this we're seeing. The mesh that is baked is going to be closer to this thing we're seeing. So let's reduce it to 1.6, and we're just going to bake. And yeah, we have baked the mesh. Please note that these settings I'm putting don't work for everybody. That's the thing about simulation. You have to, it's a trial and error kind of thing. You have to try something, it failed, you change another parameter, it failed. Because simulation, this is how simulations work in all 3D softwares. No matter what, even if you have the same parameters, you simulate, you X the simulation, you keep the same parameters, and then you re-simulate. The simulation is not going to behave as it behaved last time. That's just how simulations in 3D work. So now we can see the liquid is looking sweet. It is looking sweet. Woo! Look at this liquid sim now, guys. And that's basically it. If we go into our rendered view, yeah, and you can see Blender already gives it like a liquid material, a water material, and that's very useful. So now we can just put off this proxy mesh and then on our actual bottle. Yeah, you can see our bottle is still to scale because we didn't add the bottle in while we are scaling up the whole scene. So now this is where this stuff was useful. So now we just click on the empty. Thank God that happened. Thank God that happened. So we just click on the empty, and then we'll press Alt S to reverse the scale. And now you can see the particles are now bigger because the particles are now how it was when it was scaled down. So now what we want to do is we want to hide the particles. So we'll click on the domain, yeah, and then we'll go into particle settings, and you can see liquid here. So I'm just going to hide that in viewport. Even if you hide it in render, it doesn't matter because it's already baked into mesh. So I'm just going to hide that, and now you can see it. We can see how our scene is looking. So let's go into the rendered view. So here we are in the rendered view, and we can see that Blender has already given this a water shader. So let's see if we can change this. I believe I still have the actual liquid shader for the Lacacera here. So yeah, we can just add this kind of calm. Yeah, this kind of calm. And that's basically how the splash liquid simulation was created. And then for the speed ramp that you guys actually saw, for the speed ramp, that's the last thing I say before I go. I've rambled a lot. For the speed ramp, before you actually bake the simulation, in the settings you see this time scale option that is here. You can animate it. To animate it, when you hover over it, you just press I, and then you can see to add a keyframe, and then you set a value. You scroll forward in your timeline. You can see how it is here. You scroll forward in your timeline, you set another value here, and then you press I again, and that's how I animated the speed ramp of the fluid simulation. Well, hope you guys learned something new. If you learned something new, don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, peace. I have so much more coming. Yup.